And I started the Pride Parade in Queens for a couple of reasons. In 1990, there was a young gay man named Julio Rivera who was murdered on the corner of 78th Street and 37th Avenue. So they came, they found Julio, they clobbered him over the head with a 40-ounce bottle of beer and then stabbed him in the back, and he died on the corner. And that helped to galvanize the community. That, they picked Julio to kill because he was gay, or they thought he was gay, but they could have also killed him because he was Latino. And we're walking down the street, and I remember getting to the reviewing stand on 89th Street, and they have an announcer, and in Spanish he said, oh, and now we have the Queens Lesbian and Gay Pride Committee, and they're a part of our community too. And to me, that was a really rewarding experience to have him say that. That was 1993, and that was because of these Latino women. I really believe that the way to win equality was to put a face on the tens of thousands of LGBT people who actually live in the borough of Queens, and we needed people to understand that we were their family, their friends, and their neighbors. But in the 80s, with ACT UP, it was difficult. People really, when cops wouldn't touch you, they'd put on gloves. It was tough. And it was the middle of the AIDS crisis as well. And the thing is that people didn't know if we were going to get AIDS, were we infected. At that point, I don't think they actually even had the test yet. Well, gay people, number one, have to always walk down the street with one eye over their shoulder to make sure that, what's coming up behind them or whatever.
Still
Especially
today?
Even today. Yeah, I would think so. You're always conscious of it because you never really know. Maybe less today than then. Certainly things have changed. We have marriage and stuff like that. But still, you have to be a little careful. You just don't know how people are going to react,
A woman in really a block away from where I live was attacked, and I'm not recalling her name right now, but it was documented, and she was attacked by a man who I think the act was kind of violent, hit her with a hammer. And I remember being very worried and scared that kind of violence was in the neighborhood that I grew up in. I was really one of the only openly out kids in my school, and yeah, I didn't really get bullied. I think a lot of people just kind of were aware that I was different. Yeah, it was, and the I think teachers were also really supportive.
I think during this time there's a lot of increasing transphobia, and that ultimately results in violence and oppression of all people, really, because to be transphobic is to deny every single person the ability to express themselves in whatever way that they want, right? So I think to remind ourselves not to normalize the transphobia that is being spoken of from this administration, and have dialogue at home and inter-community dialogue as well. Because we're gonna leave, today, we're gonna leave, and this discussion doesn't just stay here. We should continue the discussion, and again, not just see trans people as tokens, like, oh, we had a trans event at York, it's so progressive, right? It's like, how can we bring that back into our communities, into our classrooms, into our homes, and actually make impact? Yeah.
We're talking about being a little kid in the 1950s. There was no gay, much less LGBTQ, TGNC. None of that existed, and I just knew I felt these feelings. I discovered that my little friends did not share these feelings. I had gotten in trouble with my mother, so I learned about having shame at a very young age. And I tried to explain, I have issues with gender identity. I don't feel like male. I don't know what to do. And they said, oh, okay, we have no idea what you're talking about. But they said down at the the gay center on West 13th Street, they have something called Gender Identity Project. And you should go there.
And not many people have access to these resources to learn these new terms. And that's why a lot of older trans people get kind of left behind and alienated from their own community. And I completely agree with you on bringing community together, because that's how we even got to this fucking point to begin with. Like, that's how we even got here and have survived thus far, is from intense community organizing. We seem to have forgotten history. Like,
in those days, there was no internet, no Instagram, no Snap. There were no computers. There was no cable TV. And so it was word of mouth. It was going through the bars. And the idea of a group of trans women getting together and creating a community in the early 1990s and the late 1980s was revolutionary. Today it's old hat. But to be able to meet and talk to trans women in the daytime without alcohol was profound.
So recently I've been thinking about queer futurity and like what the future of queer people is going to look like. So it's really interesting that it's happening today.
In other boroughs, you may have large African American populations, but it's primarily African American. You might have large Latino, primarily from one country. Here, you have everybody thrown into the mixture here. And everybody maintains their cultural identity, which is what's so important. In Jackson Heights, we have a Colombian parade, a Bolivian parade, a Dominican parade. I'm going to leave somebody out. We have a gay pride parade. You know, we have, now they want to have the Indian parade, you know.
So the biggest problem that I see really is transcends our trans identities. And it's the American story, it's racism really. What happens is our battles are fought, victories are won, and why people get all the rewards. And people of color continue to be left behind, whether you're LGBT, GNC, or not.
The LGBT community was just LGB. The trans and intersex was very much left out. And I think people really do forget, or at least put up a front that they don't know that Black trans women are the reasons we have all the rights that we have today. That the reason that these women were slain in the streets, these women were beaten. Their voice was stolen from them, so everybody could have rights.
Gay, straight, black, white, same struggle, same fight.
Like, we all have different narratives on how we got to become who we are. But we're here, right? So while we're here, we need to remove the divides that keep us separated while we're here. I was just telling someone that we get into this henpecking match. Every day on Facebook, you see it. I know you see it. Non-binary, oh, they're this and they're cross-dressers, and I'm the definition of what trans, and you're not real, you're late, you're 5 years, or this is new, this is old, this is that, this is that. If we're henpecking each other, how do we expect for them to understand it?
I want for the people that are younger than me to never experience the things that I've gone through, and that's why I speak. I want them to have the privilege of things that I did not have. I want so much for these young transgender women, especially transgender women of color, to not experience violence, to not have to wonder, you know, what's tomorrow going to be like? Am I dressed comfortable enough that when I leave the house, no one's going to clock me, no one's going to attack me? I want them to feel safe.
I knew I had found my home. I knew I had found my community. And I would imagine for other youth, even youth today are going through that, you know, and not knowing their sexuality or not knowing where that community is.
It's very much, I feel very, very safe in Queens. Every time I go home, I am not concerned about what I'm wearing, who I am, because I've been there. Everyone knows who I am, you know? When I go to Brooklyn, when I go to Manhattan, I work off of West 4th now, you know? So when I go to Manhattan, I see the way people stare at me. I see the way the tourists stare at me.
That's why I always loved that. I always felt safe in this neighborhood, no matter what time of day or night. And as a gay person, even, I feel safe walking in this neighborhood, because there were, for as long as I know, there were always gay people here also. And many of them are immigrants. But even that is changing. And you can visually see it. If you walk from 72nd Street to Junction Boulevard along 37th Avenue, you have almost every nationality in the world represented here, literally.
Queens has 100 different cultures, and some of them are wild and crazy and lefty, and some of them go back hundreds and hundreds of years. And those of us in the circle and our friends that are watching, all of us have seen all that different concept of culture here in Queens. And for us to be authentic, it's really important how much time and effort it's going to take to educate our neighbors and our parents and their parents. And, you know, rather than always talking, it's important that young people can really lead the way.
It's really inspiring to hear the stories of trans people that are older than me, and knowing that they've been able to do something, you know, with themselves, with their life. Because it definitely sometimes feels a little scary to be a young trans woman and not know how you're going to survive in the long run.